good shot.
We're still on halacha base. The Mechaber said the din of Pas Paltar. So I want to start by talking about a din that the Shach brings. That the Shach says is medayek. He's seemingly on the word that it says the people who are mekel, if you buy bread minachtem ha'ovid kachavim, that is from a guy who's a nachtem. So the Shach brings that many people say that the only time there's a heter Pas Paltar is if the paltar is a guy, if the owner of the bread is a guy. But if a yid owns bread, then there's no heter Pas Paltar. Okay, that's the Shach.
Correct. It's just nachtem over there, which is the correct. Nachtem is a baker. Paltar is someone who buys from the nachtem. Is a middleman.
Is that true?
That doesn't have mishnayos in the mind.
That what? That a paltar is?
Paltar is a buys from the nachtem. The nachtem is the baker.
Okay, and the paltar is?
Paltar buys from the nachtem and sells it to the balabatim.
Okay, he's like the distributor.
Yeah.
Okay, so that explains to me why. I talked to Saw in the Chazal Stream. He says in Chazal we call it paltar, but really the right word is nachtem, but we call it paltar. Okay, good. Okay, so now you explain it to me. Anyhow, okay. So anyhow, yes, he calls it a nachtem, but so we colloquially call him a paltar. Okay, if that's the right way to say it. Okay, so anyhow, so the Rishach is medayek. He's not that I don't think the Mechaber means to say this, but he's being medayek. He's making a point that the only time there's a heter of Pas Paltar is when the bread belongs to a guy, and then the guy was the paltar. But if the bread belongs to a yid, then there's no heter Pas Paltar.
You mean the flour and the water?
The original bread, whatever you want to call it. You know, when it was originally made, the dough. Let's call it when the dough belonged to a guy, to a yid, then there's no heter Pas Paltar. Okay, and he brings this from the Torah. He starts by saying it's from the Torah, but he throws in also that you should know that the Teres Chatas, which is the Ramah, and the Heter, and the Taz say this, and he brings other things. The Mordechai, other people who say this also. Okay, it's a lot of people who say this. The Taz is later, like also, it's like a passing that the Taz says it. You wouldn't catch it until someone told you maybe that they said that. But there's a lot of people who say this. Okay, so what's the reason for this? What would be the reason why there should be such a din? There's a Heter Pas Paltar, that there's no chashash of chasnas. So what's the difference whether a yid or a guy owns this thing? Okay, so the first thing you would think is, if you look at this thing, you would say, what we're trying to say, it's something along the lines of the sheet of the Mechaber. The Mechaber holds that Pas Paltar is only mutter if there's no Pas Yisroel available. Pas Paltar shel Akum is only mutter if there's no Pas Yisroel available. So, you'll say that in the case where the yid owned the bread, if the yid owned the bread, then it's sort of like in his control. We're only being makel when it's out of the Jews' control. They're stuck. They have to do this. But here the Yid owned the bread. He could have just been involved with the baking anyhow. So why wasn't he involved in it? So not why was he? So it's like sort of like the Pas is all available because the Yid could have just made the bread. His own bread he could have made. So there happens to be no baker in town. But this guy's like so close. He's like such a part of the business. He could have done it. So it's sort of like this Pas is all available. Okay. We're going to get to Rosh Mercer's a drop different. We're going to get that in a second. But it's sort of along those lines. That the problem with saying such a shita, the problem with saying that it's within the shita of Mechaber is that it's worse than that. The Teres Chatas is in Siman Ayin Hey Halacha Beis. The Teres Chatas who brings this in is Halacha Beis, and Halacha Aleph is what the Ramah says. He starts by saying Pas Paltar Shal Akum is mutter even if this Pas is all available. And then he says this thing. It's not like it's like separated. It's like one right after the other. It's halacha aleph and halacha beis. So it's no connection to the sheets of Mechaber. It's not because when this pas is all available, then you can't have it, and this is like pas is all available. It's not like that. We'll get to Moshe in a second.
Don't say the reason. Don't say the reason why this.
Nobody gives reason. Right. Nobody gives reason. No.
It's got to be obvious then.
Right. So exactly. It's got to be obvious. Okay. So the next answer that I want to tell you what the pshat might be will be very.
What's the question?
What's the reason for this? And why?
What's
about Teres Chatas is that if you think that this din of that when the Yid owns it, you're not eat it, it's because of having to do the sheets of Mechaber. That we're only matir b'shas hadchak, and this is not such a shas hadchak. It doesn't read because the Ramah himself says it's mutter even if it's not a shas hadchak. And then he says, it's the next word. It's right, one following the other. If he's going along with it in Teres Chatas, so it's not just taking theory. The Ramah worded one right there. So the other possibility, which I think to me is the most logical, but you'll see what the problem is. The most logical, like you're saying, it's got to be like as in this is obvious, is something that's a little bit more complicated, but it's worth it to talk about it just to hear the shita. Okay, which is the Shach says that this comes from a Torah. Okay, the Torah says this din 2 times. First, at the very beginning of the simon, he says quickly in passing, and later on, what we have as halacha test, he says it more openly. In halacha test, basically says nothing to explain it. Blank. It's like there's nothing. He says nothing about it. In the beginning of the simon, he gives a whole hesper about the Torah, and sort of Taichad Dvarim is a little bit as explained the sheet of the Torah. What does he say like this? The Torah has a completely different sheet about Pas Yisrael than what we hold, than what we're familiar with. Okay, and the Torah is based on two questions, based a lot on these two questions. First is, why is there a difference between the Isser of Pas Yisrael, or the Isser Pas Akum, and Bishul Akum? They seem basically to be the same thing. Both things is, if a guy cooks food, then you're not allowed to eat it unless the eat is part of the cooking. So what's the difference? Why are there two separate things? One about food, most foods, and one about past kind of foods. Why isn't it just one big Isser? Okay, now, there are answers to that question, but it is a question. What's the difference between these two? Okay, but second is, and a more like Lamaisa question is, the Gemara that says, how do you make something Pas Yisrael? There's three ways, three things the Yid can do to make Pas Yisrael. It's coming in a few halachas, a few things the Yid can do to make it Pas Yisrael. That Gemara is talking about Pas. Okay? Talking about bread. How do you make bread to be kosher? Well, that Gemara is not in the sugya of Pas Yisrael. It's not, the Gemara of Pas Yisrael is one Gemara with a little bit later on. 3 blot later, in the middle of the Gemara of Bishul Yisrael, comes in the Gemara to tell you, how do you make food Pas Yisrael? So it's like, what's going on? Why do we wait till now? If this is this member that says how you take Pas and turn it into Pas Yisrael, why isn't it back in the sugya of Pas Yisrael? Why isn't it in the sugya of Bishul Yisrael? Doesn't make sense. The Gemara that tells you could light the fires and you could put the food on, things like that. Why isn't that in the Gemara of Pas? It's talking about bread. So the Torah holds that the din of Pas Yisrael is not like what we think. Bread and all foods have a din of Bishul Yisrael. They all need to have a yid to light the fire and stuff like that. Pas has an additional din, that the kneading of the dough has to be under the ownership of a Jew. It has to be like sort of like Gevinas Akum, like the Rama holds, the Shachos has to be the Jews' thing. When you create the dough, when you first make the batter, it has to be that it belongs to a Yid at that time. And after the Yid does that, after he makes it Pas Shel Yisrael, he still has to make it Bishul Yisrael. Afterwards, when he bakes it, the Yid still has to bake it. So in the Gemara of Pas, how do you make Pas Yisrael? It doesn't say anything, because how do you make Pas Yisrael? What do you make? If the Yid owns it, when he makes it into a bread, then when he kneads it and he creates it, he forms it maybe even, then it has to belong to a Yid. Then the Gemara about Bishul Akum happens to be, it's telling you how to make Bishul Yisrael, and it happens to use as an example a piece of bread. It could have said a potato also. That Gemara, in that case, the bread is the shayla of how to make it Bishul Yisrael. So bread needs to be, first has to be Pas Yisrael, and then later it has to be Bishul Yisrael also. So the Gemara in Bishul Yisrael is telling you how to make Bishul Yisrael. The Torah says, if a guy kneads the dough and makes it into the shape, and a Yid bakes it, it's treif. It's Bishul Akum. It's not Pas Akum, it's Bishul Akum. It's Bishul Yisrael, but it's Pas Akum. Does that make sense?
The guy needed it.
A guy needed it, and a Yid baked it, it's Bishul Yisrael and Pas Akum. Because the Pas Akum has nothing to do with Bishul Yisrael. They're two completely different things. Okay? This is not at all like what we think.
What is this word?
This is the Torah. This is the Torah shita of what Pas Yisrael is. This is what the Torah holds. What Pas Yisrael and Bishul Yisrael are two totally different worlds. They have nothing to do with each other. So Pas comes first. First, you have in Pas there's a requirement that in the creation of the dough, the Yid has to participate. And Bishul has another, and then there's a second din. Pas and tafshils and all kinds of things have to be cooked by a Yid. It's a separate din. It applies to both. Now, so the heter of Pas Paltar is sort of extends a little bit beyond what it has to. Pas Paltar says that if a guy needed the dough, if a guy said it's so hard to get Pas Yisrael, we allow the Isser of Pas Yisrael, Pas Akum goes off for a paltar, and sort of like as a secondary thing, is that the Isser of Bishul Yisrael goes off on the bread also. Okay? According to the Torah, there are two kulas in the din of Pas Paltar. Pas Paltar, not only is it matir the din of Pas Akum, it's also matir the Isser of Bishul Akum on Pas foods. The same doichak that there is, you can't be matir one without the other. It doesn't do me any good to tell me that a guy could need it if the Yid has to make it, because Yid can't bake it. They don't own the bakeries. So the heter of Pas Paltar is a two-sided heter. Primarily, it's matir the din of Pas Akum, the Isser of Pas Akum, it's matzah. That's the first thing that it's matzah. And then, like as a secondary thing, to make it have any teeth, it has to be matzah the Isser of Bishul Akum also, which according to the Torah is a separate Isser. Okay, so according to the Torah, there's the heter of Pas Paltar has two parts to it, and first it's matzah the Isser of Pas Akum, and then it's matzah the Isser of Bishul Akum. Now, according to the Torah, we understand what this din is going to be. That says that if a yid, we could potentially understand what it means. That if a yid owns the dough, then the dough has to Pas Paltar. According to the Torah, it means something that a yid owns the dough. There's such a thing in the world as a yid owning dough. It has some kind of meaning. It means something that makes it Pas Yisrael. That's what makes the food Pas Yisrael. So we could say that the heter of Pas Paltar doesn't apply in certain cases. What are those? What is that case? The case when the yid owns the dough, when the primary is heter Pas Paltar, the primarily is being matzah the Isser of Pas Akum. Over here, there is no Isser Pas Akum because the yid owns the dough. So we say, oh, Pas Paltar is not being matzah the primary thing. It's not going to be matzah the secondary thing either. It won't be matzah the Bishul Yisrael, the Bishul Akum either. But so according to the Torah, there's some kind of sense to this. And again, the Shach said that if a yid owns the dough, then there's no heter Pas Paltar. So according to the Torah, this has some meaning to it. According to the Torah, yid owning the dough means something. In the rules of Pas Yisrael, a yid owning the dough takes off the Isser of Pas Yisrael. And then the second Isser of Bishul Akum, Pas Akum, sorry. But then the second Isser of Bishul Akum, that would usually get taken off by a paltar. So in this case, it doesn't because the primary Isser didn't get taken off. Okay, but in this world, in the world of the Torah, there's some, you could imagine some kind of a sense to this whole thing of Pas owned by a yid pas owned by a yid has no heter of bishul by a paltar.
Are we talking bishul? Well, I'm sorry that I didn't.
Go ahead.
I didn't know this.
Okay.
They're cooking this dough afterwards.
Baking the dough afterwards. Yeah.
Baking's an issue of bishul.
So what I'm saying, what you missed was that the Torah has a special sheet. The Torah has a special sheet. The Torah has a special sheet that holds that bread has a double isser. It has to be Pas Yisrael and Bishul Yisrael. That means it has to make it Pas Yisrael, the yid has to be the one who owns it when you kneaded the dough, when you created the shapes or whatever you make.
He has to own it or he has to knead it?
Own it.
He has to own it.
And the second thing is that it then has to be Bishul Yisrael, like the potato has to. The yid has to cook it also.
So then
Those are two different things.
And what about the
So he has to do something, lighting the fire, any of those kind of
things. He doesn't, the tour or the macabre.
It's the Torah.
I understand. Wouldn't hold that you would have to mamish put the
no.
tour would hold you have to.
Right.
And nobody would hold that
On
mamish.
bread. Nobody holds like that on bread. It's only on non-pas.
Foods, right.
Okay. So according to the Torah, we can understand this then, like Yossi said, it must be some kind of obvious thing. According to the Torah, we can at least begin to hear it. Mm-hmm. And then guess what? Then we understand why in the Beis Yosef, he doesn't bring anybody who argues on it. But lo and behold, it doesn't say it in the Shulchan Aruch. Why doesn't he say that? Where's this din that the Torah said that if the yid owns the dough, then there's no heter Pas Paltar? Why doesn't it say in the Shulchan Aruch? No one argued on it. The answer is because the Beis Yosef doesn't say anyone who argues on this point directly, but he tells you the Beis Yosef is full of people who don't hold to the Torah Shita. The whole Torah Shita that Pas and Bishul that Pas has two requirements and is different than Pas. So of course we don't hold like that. Now of course we don't hold like that then. So Lamela is very obvious why the Machaber wouldn't have said it. Right? This is all very nice. This makes them, to me, is logically fits in very well with what the Torah, with what's going on here. The only problem is, you know what the obvious problem is. The problem is, well then why in the world is Teres Chatnas and the Shach and the Taz and everybody saying this thing? Nobody else holds like the Torah, so that's what I can tell you. The Torah, if I had to close my eyes and just
fatal flow, the pshat there.
That's correct. No, but I'm saying, but in theory, this din, which is coming from a Torah, has lots of sense to it. Okay, but something's wrong with it because it can't fit. Because why is everybody else bringing it? Right? So they obviously the Torah. The Torah, we have no idea. It doesn't bring any rights to it. He just says this in that if a yid owns the dough, there's no heter Pas Paltar. That's what he says. Okay, so Rav Moshe said something. It's along the lines of what I said at the beginning, but it's a variation. He says like this. He says the heter of Pas Paltar is only because it's very hard to get Pas Yisrael. That's the reason why Chazal made that heter, because it was hard to get it. So he says you get like a sort of a feeling that Chazal, even when they let you eat Pas Paltar, it's not really mutter. They don't really want you to eat this stuff. But they're sort of like stuck and they're letting you eat the food anyhow. So the Torah holds now. Misvar. I have to tell you, Moshe says he doesn't know what the makar for this is, but he says the Torah must tell misvara that in the case where the yid owns the bread, and the yid could easily just do the things to make it pas Yisroel. So in that case, Chazal wouldn't have been matter to you. The whole thing is, we all we know that Chazal don't really want you to eat this food. They're sort of letting you because you're stuck. So if you're letting you because you're stuck, the yid was so close. Come on, guys, it was your stuff. You own the bread. Why don't you just make it pas Yisroel? So in that case, they wouldn't have been willing to make it for you. Okay, so that's along the lines, and we're going to again have the question. We had the same real question, which is, that's very nice in the sheet of the Mechaber. The Mechaber holds that if there's pas Yisroel available, you can't eat Pas Paltar. But the Rambam holds Pas Paltar is mutter in all cases. So even though the reason for it is because of the Darchad, so what? So Ramesh will have to say that according to the Rambam, it's an example of no loy plug. Meaning, in the loy plug is even when there's no Darchad, you can still eat it anyhow. Even when there's no Darchad, Pas Yisroel available, you can eat it anyhow. Mm-hmm. But that only applies in cases that are similar to the original case. If you have a case that's really different, like this case where a yid owns it, it's like a whole different case, then you have to think about it. Does it make sense or not make sense to say this? Okay? Now, but there's a question what Moshe says. The question what Moshe says, which is a riot to what I said before, like the Torah, the question is, what does it say? If a dough is owned by a Jew, then there's no heter of Pas Paltar. Okay? And what do you call the food that was baked by the Paltar, a Jew's bread that was baked by Paltar? And everyone says the answer is Bishalakim. The answer is if a Jewish person owned the bread and a guy baked and a Paltar shall guy baked it, then the food is usher. It's Bishalakim. Bishalakim. Yeah, Bishalakim. That's not what you're supposed to say. You're supposed to say Pasakim. You're supposed to say there's no heter Pas Paltar. So the answer is Pasakim. Everyone says no. The answer is Bishalakim. Why is it Bishalakim? All the people who are saying this thing, the Taz is quick. What? Yeah. Why are they saying that it's Pasha? So the Taz, which is in half a word, is saying this. Is Bezeh in the case where it's blown sweet. Yeshli din shlokas, and this could be Sim Kuf Gimel. That it's that's also says Bishalakim. The Torah says it's Bishalakim. Why is it Bishalakim? This is bread, which should be Pasakim. So that sounds like you're saying, like the Torah said, that the pas part of it we dealt with, and the Isser is Bishalakim. That's the new Isser that's left over. For sure in the Torah, that's what it means. Everybody else who's repeating it doesn't sound like Ramesh is saying that the Isser is pas. What Ramesh will tell you is that how can you call something pas akum when it was made by a baker? That sort of doesn't fit because pas paltar is mutter. So it's sort of like for words we call it bishalakum because paltar is really mutter. So like a funny way we have when this funny thing we have a paltar, we have like a funny way to say it. We call it bishalakum, but it really doesn't fit so great that we should call this issue called bishalakum. This is a pas akum. Okay, so
anybody has this question?
Nothing, no, but it's just a point. I'm not saying it's right, and most people will seem like a mush. That's just in the case where the yid owned it, the yid could have made the pas. Chazal are not willing to be making on that kind of a case, and they revert to calling it pas or bishlach. Now, Rav Moshe takes this hesber and makes a huge chiddush out of this hesber, okay, which is maybe most people here know this chiddush, but the chiddush is he says the only time that if a yid owns it, do we say that pas paltar is mutter, is aser? Is only because it's really easy for the yid to do it. It's my dough. Why didn't I already make it pas Yisroel? He says, but if I'm in a commercial bakery, then I own this huge bakery. He says, I'm not going to bake every loaf of bread. I'm not going to sit around and bake the food. He says, so in that case, you're telling me I'm going to have to hire only Jewish employees to work in my place. He says, already at that point, we're not holding by a thing where it's easy.
Turn on the oven. Turn on the oven.
When you come in.
Have what is it called? Share, what is it?
Shane. That's my question. That's my question. Very good. That's my question. But Moshe said, this is what Moshe says. He said, so we're only saying that the pas that belongs to the Jew is mutter, that needs a...
I think what the question is the guy at a huge company in California that might believe 5 planes in different places. He's in a corporate office in who knows where. And 5 planes in who knows where.
He's not as dramatic as you are. Okay, I have to tell you. And
he was not a dramatic man.
No, and if he meant like you, he would have answered that. He has a kasha from the Hagoyos on the tour. There's a kasha on what he says. He brings a kasha on himself and what he says. Then he would have answered. So even if we'll take something along the lines of your answer, it's going to mean that Rav Moshe's heter is only going to apply in certain cases.
Right.
Okay, which means, okay, so I have to just tell you that it's taken, Rav Moshe's heter is taken like lock, stock, and barrel by the American hashkachos, us included, potentially us included.
You can say everything he says is coming from
experience. We would potentially take that and say, so if a yid owns a bakery, a yid owns dough, many hashkachos would say, if a yid owns the dough, even though the shach and everybody else says that you have to have pas yisrael, you don't have to, because Rav Moshe says it doesn't apply to big companies. But
the Moshe also said at the end, and befrat if the Jews
Yes.
at work, I said for sure it's good.
That's correct.
I said until that point.
Okay, but that's Yesh London, whether how serious he means. But you're right. Yes, you're right. And it's true like that. But so that means is if you have a smaller bakery, the guy runs it. Well, the guy has to they turn on the oven once a day. How often in a bakery they turn on the oven once a day? And the owner is Indian. Not he has 12 plants all over the country, like you said. He has a bakery. Why can't he turn the oven on? So remember saying it's only usher in cases where it's easy for the yid to be part of the cooking. So then why? Then his heter is very limited. Only to cases like the oven said, where really it's really difficult and attack like that. But it's not taken like that. So I'm just saying that even Moshe's kula has to be. You have to think before you apply it, because Lamaisa people are applying it to any case, any commercial bakery, and it's okay. In any commercial bakery, they say Rav Moshe says in commercial bakeries you don't have to have, even if the Jew owns it, doesn't have to be pas yisrael. And in fact, Rav Moshe is not really as makel, so to speak, as he seems to be doing. Okay, fine. Okay,
all that sham are doing it on that base on that. Even though
yes, if you say you call the house and you say to them, "Hi, is it true that blank bakery is owned by Jews?" Yes, it's owned by a Jew. Is it possible? No, it's not. Why? Because Rav Moshe says in a commercial bakery, you don't have to make it possible. What did you say?
Rav Moshe is not clear. I mean, I've heard many studies about what Rav Moshe really means.
What's not clear about it?
In Rav Moshe's Shuvah itself, it's very clear that he says he doesn't need it.
That he doesn't need what?
Pas yisrael.
You're saying this. You're saying more machmer. Maybe he's not clear. He needs to be well. What David's opinion is that at the end of the Shuvah says, he said, I think it's mutter. He says, ubefrat. In a case where the workers are non-frum Jews, so there's those many hold that would be pas yisrael anyhow. So then you could for sure be makel. So you could read into that he only means to make a bitzir of that. I don't think that's the way the flow of the Shuvah is.
I don't mean to.
I
I know that the place can have a hard time trying to understand what Rav Moshe means. This is the way you're learning it. Did you see someone touch up
That he's
Rav
makel.
Moshe like that he's making?
Yeah, go to the bakery, go to the supermarket, and you'll see it. Go to the bakery, and you go to the. If you go to
I'm
the.
talking about, I mean from the place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. If you and hashkachos are relying on it lamaisa. In other words, if you go to the supermarket, you'll see it.
This will be the tour.
But the problem is
Rama holds its mutter.
no, because the shach, the Rama himself, you miss it. The Rama in his sefer Teres Chata that's fine. Teres Chata says that it's mutter. Says that it's mutter. Teres Chata says that that's also the shach and the taz. But the Rama holds that even if pas yisrael is available, you're allowed to eat pas paltar. However, if a Jew owned the dough, then the heter pas paltar doesn't apply.
So he agrees with the tour and that and everybody.
Well, he would seem to be in the Teres Chata. It doesn't. It's not for here in the good book over here. It's not for here. When Teres Chata says, okay.
Just wondering,
You're going to hear about it for 6 months. Forget it. You're going to move in my office for 6 months.
Well, only shared in
Good. Okay.
in Rav Moshe's Shuvah the Paltar, because I hear talking the very first all the time. We claim that Rav Moshe the Klal holds there's no Pas Paltar or
You're not Bishop Akko, won't do you?
No what?
there's no Bishop. That whole thing doesn't apply to the factory.
It's company.
I was going to possibly talk about that today. We're not going to have time. We'll do it a different time. That's a different thing. So you're going to come from a different angle.
You see that true is that I not like it.
Right. The implication of that true is not like that. That we'll talk about that. I was going to maybe do that today. I decided we didn't have time for that. Okay, wait, we're not finished. We're going to something else. Okay, but let's continue the thing. Yeah, let's continue halacha base. The Mechaber had said that there's a heter pas paltar.
His grandson.
There's a heter. Okay, guys. Okay. There's a, okay. The end of the Mechaber had said, guys. The Mechaber had said there's a din of Pas Paltar, and he continues, of a Pas Shabal Batim, if you have Pas that doesn't belong to wasn't made by a baker, it was made by a private person. Ein Sham Mishamor B'Lo Hakel, no one is makel to say that that's mutter. Ikar Hagzer Mishum Chasnus, because of Chasnus, Yimyocha Pas Balibatim, Yovel, you might come to eat by them, and that will lead to Chasnus. Now, in fact, in Halacha Ches, we'll find out that there are some people who makel. Okay, but that's not for now. So the Mechaber says Pas Balibayis is not mutter. Okay, we'll get to Halacha Ches, we'll find out that there might be making about that also, but it's not. For now, he says it's mutter. Now, the Ramah says, "V'loy mikri pas balbayis." It's only considered pas balbayis in masor livnei beisay. If he made it for the people in his house, avlosor limkar mikri palter. If a private person at home bakes cakes to sell to the public, then that private person is considered, it has the din of a palter. Even though they're not usually that. I mean, to be called a palter, you don't have to wear a funny hat on your head that makes you look like a baker. It means if you're making it for public sale, you're a palter. You have the cool palter. If you're making it for private use, then you're a balbayis. Okay, it doesn't make a difference what your profession is. It makes a difference what you're doing while you're making this. And he said the opposite. If a palter makes it at home, he makes the cookies at home, mikri balbayis. So for that, then he's considered balbayis. Okay,
Depends on the situation.
It depends. It has nothing to do with your profession. It has to do with why you're making it. Okay, and in fact, there's even a shaila in the achronim as to what happens if a balbayis makes it to give us a present. That might even be considered a palter. I mean, he didn't make it to sell. He gave it as a present. Should we consider that to be a private use or for public use? Okay. So that's what the Mechaber Ramah says. And just for point of reference, we're going to come back to this next. The Ramah says in parentheses, "Kain mashal v'veises." Okay. Now halacha gimel. It's again to what we're talking about. Okay. Yesh mishaymer. There are those who say, "She'im palter his min Yisroel." If a palter invites a yid over to his house, harepite kapas balbayis, we treat his bread like the bread of a balbayis. Okay, we consider his bread like the bread of a balbayis. Now, the simple understanding is that what happened over here is like this: a palter baked bread. Okay, he works in Al Qayyim bakery and he baked bread, and then he said, "Come over to my house and come eat with me in my house." Now, why is that bread? The Mechaber is saying is that this bread is not in the kula Pas Paltar. Now, why is it not in the din of Pas Paltar? He baked it as a paltar. He baked it in his bakery. So why, if he brings you to his house to eat it, the bread B'chara was baked as Pas Paltar and it should be mutter? Okay, so now, the simple understanding is the bread was baked by a paltar.
By a paltar in his house.
No.
In his bakery.
The paltar invited you to his house. So the paltar, I don't know if that's the case. The simple reading would be that the paltar baked this in his bakery, and now the paltar baked the bread, and he invited you to his house. So now you're getting the pas of the paltar in his house. You're saying is that it means is that the
paltar's baking it
in his house as a private citizen.
Can you read the Lashon again, Rabbi Cohen?
Okay, in Yesh Mishaymish, in paltar his min Yisroel, if a paltar invites over a yid, harepite kapas balbayis, then his bread becomes like a pas balbayis.
It's the same way he's baking it.
If it's in his house, then he knows how to kip out. It means he got it.
Since he's a paltar, maybe even though he's baking in his house, it could be that he's going to sell it also.
It's a machlokes. It's machlokes. The Mechaber's din is coming from a Ra'ah. The Mechaber's din is coming from a Ra'ah, from a Ra'ah, and the Ra'ah says that the pshat is like this: when a paltar bakes it in his bakery, it's mutter. If the paltar brings it to his house, now it changes over to being pas balbayis. It was pas paltar. The whole reason for pas paltar, the heter, is because you have no connection to the paltar. But as soon as he brings it to his house, now by eating by him, you'll feel close to him, and now you will feel connection. It could lead to chasnas. So if you bring it to his house, it becomes pas balbayis.
According to this, if you have pas Yisroel, it should also be the same din.
That what?
Because you're getting chasnas of it.
The
The guy went to the store to Tel Aviv. Norshon bought a bakery. It's the same din.
It's a good question. Okay, I have a more. We're going to get to this din. It's an halacha like heyufav. There's really nothing. The problem is it's halacha zayin. The problem is like this. That question, if you start to bake this pas paltar, and then the paltar brings it to his house, does that turn to become pas balbayis? Can it change after it was baked?
The din the guy or din the
look at it, right. That shaila is a machlokes, the Ra'ah and the Rashba. Okay, that's a machlokes. And in halacha zayin, the Mechaber passes like the Rashba. Okay, the Mechaber passes that once you bake it as a pas paltar, it's mutter forever. You can't change it afterwards. Okay, so how come over here he's bringing the sheet of the raw? Okay, this is not my question. I'm not so smart. So this is the Shach's kasha. The Shach says, what's going on over here? And Halacha Zayin, he passes that once the palta bakes it, it's mutter forever. Okay, so how can it be that just because he brings it home doesn't change it becoming heter? That's a machlokes. There is such a shita, but that's not what the Mechaber holds. Yes.
Well, let's say he's going to learn up. The pshat is that it wasn't completely baked yet. He finished it off in his house.
No, so that's not what he said. So he said, I'll tell you what he said.
You know, parve.
The Shach gives two answers. One is, this is to me surprising. He says is really the Mechaber passes like the Rama, like the Rajba later on. But he says here yesh misha oimer. He doesn't mean to pass like this. He's just telling you there is such a shita. He doesn't really hold like this shita. Okay? Really, he holds like the shita in Halacha Zayin,
Which he's going to bring down later on.
But over here, he's just saying yesh misha oimer. There is another opinion. Okay? It's hard to read because this either belongs in Halacha Zayin or you need some kind of context to it. How can he tell me yesh misha oimer that it's mutter when he's not
Holding that one.
But his second answer, which is a little easier, it's still hard to catch this, which is a little like what David's saying. If the palta invites, no, I'm sorry, I take that back. No, his teretz is coming in a second. I'm sorry. The Shach's second teretz is that even though pas paltar is mutter, when the guy invites you into his house, everything becomes usher. His inviting you into his house is like a super chash chasnas. Here it's not just like he gave you a loaf of bread. He mamash invited you into his house. That's like, forget it. No coolers of pas paltar anymore. Also, if you did that, forget it. All bets are off, and it becomes back to being what's
Hold this piece of bread and your ice pas paltar.
So the Shach is holding it's like
Where's ice kazam? You know,
that's right. The Iggeros Moshe, right? They say,
Yeah,
forget it.
ice
No.
Right. It's
It's like a
pas
super.
paltar anymore. It doesn't work that way.
What's the case now?
It just
Don't
means
that way.
if he didn't invite you to that, just he now has the bread. The palta, the guy went bought Arnold's bread, and the guy has it in his house, and he gives you a piece of it. Could you eat it? The fact that it passed through the palters, through the Baal Bais's house, would make it us. Here it's worse because he was his minion, so he asked you to come to eat it in his house.
Let's say we go back out.
Halacha Zayin is because he handed you the piece of bread.
There you get it.
He handed you bread.
Right,
So not mean to answer it. Just it's pas paltar.
Because it's past Baal Bais.
Okay.
It's coming from Baal Bais.
Because he bought it.
Because he has it now. Right now, it's by Baal Bais. Okay, we'll get that by side. I don't want to just say is that the Nekutza Kesef, I'm sorry, I know we're late, but
Do you have eat?
Now we do, yes. The Nekutza Kesef says, and the Nekutza Kesef is usually the Shach's Ha'arus, this is Moshe, is usually the Shach's Ha'arus on the Taz, okay? But in this case, it's the Shach's son over here making the Ha'arus on the Shach himself, He says he has a better answer, he has a different answer. What the Mechaber means is like this. He says like David's answer. He says this. If the palter invites you over to eat in his house, and he serves you a piece of bread, don't assume that this bread was baked in the bakery during his regular work hours. If he's inviting you into his house, he probably baked it at home. So when the palter invites you to his house, and you don't know, you have a loaf of bread here. Did he bring it from his bakery, or did he bring it from home? So you say, oh, he must have brought it from home, because even though he's our professional baker, but he probably baked this loaf of bread at home. So the reason why you're not allowed to eat it is because since you're eating from his house, so you assume that he made it in his house.
Ask a baker the last time that they baked their own made challahs in their house. Okay? There's no way. But
Okay, so I didn't want to be as dramatic as Yankee, as radical as Yankee.
Why not?
But
It's probably better. It's always better when you bake it at home.
they don't have the time. They don't do it. They don't do it now.
what he means is that the professional bakers, they don't know how to make one loaf of bread. They only know how to make 500 loaves of bread. You know? So, but I was thinking was like this. There's enough community here. What happens if you know that the palter
Came in the bag.
He brings it from the bakery. You see, he brings home 10 loaves of bread, and he's giving it to you. So according to the Nekutza Kesef, you'd be allowed to eat it. No special answer. According to what the Shach says, that his min makes it worse. His min is worse than even if we know that it's pots coming from the palter, his min somehow makes it worse. The fact that you're coming to eat in this house makes it worse.
For that, if they brought it out of the house, you brought it out, would it go back to being heter?
If you went in it,
It's like when people say that if
his min to the house, right?
If his min he brought loaf, you didn't eat it.
And they took it home with you?
They took it home with
I don't know. I'm not trying to understand his min. Like Yankee said, what do you mean his min? What happened? The bread got changed when it moved into the house?
What is this about? Is it on the
Guys, you're supposed to throw the party.
Right.
He buys Jewish bread.
He buys
pas paltar.
Okay, yeah. He buys pas paltar.
Pas paltar. There's an action on it.
Okay. So according to the Nekutza Kesef, that it's when he eats, he buys in your house, you hush that he baked himself. You know he did it. I mean, you see the stuff there with kosher. That's fine. According to the Shach, that the Shach is because his min etzloi. So I don't know what a business party, probably not his Netzah. His Netzah is like this, like he brings you into his house to sit
personal
with him.
party.
It's so much closer to the chassis, you can't be making all that. Like,
Let's say you get invited to the president.
so the
Does it mean, is it possible to adopt the same palter if he writes something else? But if it's sold out of the palter, then not somebody else can convert it back to Israel again.
you mean because it's the same guy? It's the same guy.
Same guy.
So he's the baker, so he's the
Right,
one
he's the
who.
balabas. He's the balabas to change it.
You mean say it's still like sort of in flux until it's okay.
Maybe, I don't know.
Maybe I have to tell you.
I don't think anybody would warn anybody that if the guy buys kosher bread, if I'm inviting him to my boss's house, makes a barbecue, he says, "Oh, I'll get you kosher food, no problem. I'll get a sealed, sealed from the bakery, a sealed."
But that's the shocking thing. His Minetzah makes it worse. That was the second.
I'm saying I don't think people
You would think of that shot.
process.
I have to tell you that the way the Nekudas Ketzev is learning fits better into this din, just in the structure of it. The Ramah brought it in from the Beis Yosef, saying that the idea of palter and baal bayis doesn't depend on what their profession is. It depends on how they bake this loaf of bread. So how come the Mechaber didn't bring that in? It's from the Beis Yosef. That idea that tells you that a palter and a baal bayis are two different. It has nothing to do with their profession. It has to do with what they actually make. So maybe he thinks it's obvious. But the Beis Yosef thought it was worthwhile to say it. Why didn't the Shulchan Aruch bring that in over? So according to the Nekudas Ketzev, that's actually halacha gimel. If the palter brings you to his house, now it's not the baking of a palter. The fact that he's professionally a palter, he's baking it in his house, so then it's also. So according to the Nekudas Ketzev, the reason why the Mechaber didn't bother to say that then is because he really didn't. He says in halacha gimel. According to the Shah, it's not a kasha, it's just a point. According to the Shah, it's just interesting that the Mechaber didn't say that what the Ramah said is really came master. It's really, why didn't the Mechaber say it? So it's like it's not a kasha, it's just a point. Okay.